Hello, everyone. It's July, and the highlighted nonprofit for this month is Preble Street. Go to prebblestreet.org. That's Preble, then the word street. All is one word.org. You can learn about this wonderful food security hub, which is a nonprofit that has been providing fresh food to citizens of Maine who may be experiencing food insecurity. They feed thousands and thousands of people and have been doing so since 2021, launched mid-pandemic. So these emergency food services are one of the most effective things you can do for a community, and they could really use your support. So we can you can get on there, you can donate, you can learn about them, and as always, it costs nothing to share a link and pop that up as long as we're scrolling anyway. Hey, speaking of the internet and of drug overdose, which I'm about to, August 31st is International Opioid Overdose Awareness Day. And as always, is our tradition here at the Broken Brain, is to do a live stream. It'll be a 5-hour live stream happening on Monday, August 31st. Isabel Turan will be joining me as a co-host, and we will be featuring a lot of factoids and information, as well as guests who will be coming on to talk about things like mental health, trauma, recovery, healing, overdose awareness, obviously, prevention, just all those kinds of related things. And a lot of our conversation is guided by our guests and our unofficial, or at least unscheduled guests. You will be very official. If you go to dwighthurst.com/live, you'll find the information as well as the link to where you can join the live stream. Anything that you have to say that touches on any of these subjects, or just anything about being a good human being, or if you just want to come on and tell people, hang in there. Anything at all like that. And our discussions are typically shaped by those that join us, both the ones we schedule and the ones who just done feel like it. And if you done feel like it, then please done join. That's how I said that. No going back now. All right. Everybody enjoy today's episode. Once again, remember prebblestreet.org and August 31st.
The Broken Brain.
Recording in progress.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to The Broken Brain. It's me, it's Dwight. I'm here with you today to explore more about the intersection of psychology and culture and very, very important messages. Which one? We have one of those today that we're going to be talking about. I'm joined today by Doug Prey, who is the filmmaker and director for the film Louder Than Guns, which is based off of a musical approach and musical intervention by country bluegrass singer Keith Secor, who is the lead singer of Old Crow Medicine. Let's see, it's an Old Crow Medicine Show is the name of the band, isn't it? I forgot the word show.
Catch Secor, Old Crow Medicine Show, that's right.
Catch Secor and David Green, who is an NPR reporter, and this is the story, the documentary showing how they're working together to respond to and advocate in regards to public shootings and the role of gun violence and suicide in our culture. And Doug is here to share with us about that process and that this film that really covers a lot of some things that are very important and very pressing into our culture as well. Doug, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Well, how would you tell people a little bit about this project, this film, and how did you get pulled into telling this story?
Sure. The film is about the power of conversation and the art of listening. And by that, I mean, in this culture today where it is very polarized, there's a lot of yelling, there's a lot of social media, a lot of people at each other's throats, and there's not a lot of respectful listening going on or communicating or sharing. And so the mission of the film is to bring people together on all sides of the gun debate. Gun owners, non-gun owners, people from the rural areas of America, people from urban areas or suburban, people who would consider themselves red or blue or right or left or you name it, all across the spectrum, to actually talk about their relationship to guns, their feelings about what's happening today, their experiences, and trying to move the needle on the gun violence debate to get out of the polemic shouting, basically, 100% like you're with me or you're not, that kind of thing. And more like, I think I'm looking across the table at somebody who disagrees with me on almost everything, but we actually share something here. We both want safety in our schools. We both want safety for our families. There's a lot in common. Those are pretty basic ones, but and so the film so that's just that's the mission. What the film is, we call it a music film about firearms in America. And the reason it's called a music film is that we follow the band Old Crow Medicine Show, who was a country bluegrass Americana type band, who has been playing for some years and has a real following. You might have heard their song Wagon Wheel, which is a real hit. Um, and we follow them throughout the country because the lead singer, Ketch Secor, the way this project started is he realized, well, first of all, there was a tragic shooting at the Covenant School in Nashville, Tennessee. He was close to the school. He knew people at the school. He himself had founded an Episcopal school. He's very active in that community. And he's as he says in the film, when we see all the news, but when it happens in your town,
Mhm.
it's really different. It really hits you. And that event, which killed three children and three teachers at Covenant, just shocked the community. And Ketch, as a country music musician, thought, wow, we got to do something about this. And when the country music world, when there's a flood, they all get together and have fundraisers. When there's tornadoes, when there's all sorts of things. But for some reason, the topic of gun violence is hands off for stars and for a lot of people say, oh, I'm not going to touch that. A lot of politicians, I'm not touching that. And it's just, and Catch was like, wait, if these people can come together at my shows and they can all sing and dance in the front row, and yet they represent the full range of the demographic that's out there. In other words, he has hippies and rednecks and gun owners and non-gun owners and people with red hats and blue hats in the front row of his shows all across the country. And he's like, if they can do that, why can't they come together on the subject of children being gunned down in our schools?
Mhm.
And so, just to finish up that kind of overview, so we decided to follow the band in a bunch of different cities where they played. And in each city, we would actively recruit just citizens from all walks of life to just come together to the table and actually have the hard conversation about guns and tell everybody beforehand, like, hey, we're not here to argue. This is not reality TV. I'm not looking for the angry soundbite. I'm looking
Right.
for the conversation. So that's pretty much the overview of what Louder Than Guns is. And I'll say one more thing. And it's a music film because Old Crow Medicine Show is a fantastic band. And in between these conversations, we weave in and out their performances
Yeah.
and like
Well,
that.
there's a real sentiment, and the title itself, "Louder Than Guns," is one of the songs that they wrote and performed.
That's
Um,
right. He
and
wrote that song in
yeah.
response to the Covenant
Hmm.
shooting. And so that's the name of the film. And you see that song evolve over the course of the film because he plays it for different crowds and children
Yeah.
and everybody.
So I really appreciated the way that it kept circling back to these uh like support group format discussions that was there, and for people to be really talking about how they felt.
Yeah. First of all, the topic of gun violence is very emotional. It's really hard for people to talk about. And a sadly surprising amount of people are aware of people they know who've died of gun death, suicide, especially gun deaths, suicide by guns. And it's just such a common thing, and it's just very upsetting. So it's just hard to talk about. And then you add to that the incendiary polarization of the topic, where we're really living in an echo chamber that just like, where I'm making up the statistic, but like 5% of the people on the extreme side of like pro Second Amendment and 5% of the people who are on the extreme ban everything kind of thing are just completely captured the entire conversation. And I think the majority of Americans are in the middle going, I don't know, I think
Yeah.
this, but I also think that. I'm very progressive and I don't mind legislation, but I'm a gun owner, or I'm totally against guns, but I'm not into banning them, or there's a there's an equally wide spectrum throughout
Yeah.
that middle 90%. And our project brought people together at the table, and I think that in itself is kind of a form of therapy. There's a lot to be said for the group dynamic of being in a circle and just hearing people, letting people have the time, not trying to chase that little 2 second soundbite at all. Quite the opposite. We came up with a phrase for it. We called it radical listening,
Mm.
which in 2026 just felt like, wow, it really is radical to just be quiet in a room and let somebody talk for a minute. And so that is kind of a group therapy format. I would add to that that in terms of therapy and filmmaking, that I've been making documentary films for over 30 years, and I've long believed that the interview process and the process of people telling their own story is incredibly therapeutic. It's a form of therapy without any question. And I say that because I've seen the results. I've done interviews with people that are very deep, penetrating personal interviews because I'm looking for good quotes to make a good film, which means it's quotes that are emotional, that are, that show, that delve into conflict, that deal with tougher issues. Because if everybody's just happy all the time, then that's not a very good documentary. It's called Village of the Happy People, right? And so,
Yeah,
anyway,
it's a good
just to
title.
make,
Yeah.
yeah, right.
But I would
Long
still
story
expect with that
short,
title that there'd be a dark under something there. Yeah, exactly.
well, in fact, that title brings it on way, way more. But anyway, just long story short, I've always thought that, like, whether I'm telling the story of an individual, whether they're a celebrity or not, whether it's a rock and roll band or a hip hop group or whoever, an artist, a painter, a community. I've made stories about entire communities. It's really therapeutic for them to tell their story. When they see it on the screen, it's kind of like, oh, I never realized that. And I think the same thing happens in this project too, where they kind of realize, my story is valuable. My perspective is valuable. And I thought these other people on the other side of the table were just gonna, you know, trash me for what I'm thinking.
That
And I
was,
think we all feel that. We're all worried. Like
yeah.
if I set my beliefs at a round table with gun owners and non-gun owners and everybody on the political divide, I'd be scared. I'd be like, well, okay, here's what I think. I know some of you are going to hate me, but it's like when that doesn't happen, you go, oh, I'm legitimate. I actually have a background. There's a reason I don't have a gun or I do have a gun. And those are very personal, deep reasons. A lot of gun owners in this country, just as an example, they grew up with guns. Their grandfather took them out hunting. It was one of the most formative experiences in their life. Like they're not going to just flip and be anti-gun. That's not going to happen. And so, and vice versa too. There's a lot of people, on other, maybe that more, there's no the more anti-gun, like there's a lot of real deep reasons for that. Somebody may have had a death in the family or experienced violence. And it's like, no, I'm not going near that. We're not going to touch that. I want to change, I want legislation to change this country. And we're afraid of those opinions nowadays because the loudmouths have taken over and that's what the media wants.
Well, and then, and we don't look at some elements. I mean, one example, look at progressive organizations historically that have also, I mean, the Black Panther organization believed in the right to bear
Totally.
arms in order to
Yeah.
protect themselves from, brutality or whatever in those things. And so just being able to talk about things, I was curious, do you find both in this film specifically, but also in general, when you're approaching that radical listening and you're helping people to feel safe to open up, is it difficult to get that buy-in to where people not so much getting them to listen, but getting them to feel like they're going to be listened to? Because
Hmm.
another thing that I think you see nowadays is if I'm being filmed, what are they going to do with it? I mean, if somebody, we have this element of someone coming up and saying, "Hey, I've got a YouTube channel. I want to ask you some questions." And if you're smart, you go, "Nick, get the hell away from me. I don't know what this is going to look like," or something. So when you're actually doing this kind of work, how do you get people's buy-in to feel like they're going to be treated with respect?
It's all about trust. and the approach and how you're handling them, even in the first phone call, or even when they first walk into the room and you say, "Hey, thank you for joining us. How are you? Like, who are you?" It's all about trust, and I work really hard to build trust with my subjects. Even if it's a quick interview, I'll just quickly pull them aside and say, "Hey, thank you so much. Like, you're doing me a favor. We're not here to, to steal you." And like, it's like, I really dislike interviews where the director feels like they're pushing them around, and it's just, I don't go for that style. A lot of directors do that, and it works in its own weird way, but I don't go for
It's a
that. I
different
just am
goal, I
all,
think, right?
yeah. So
Yeah.
what we did, what I specifically did to gain the trust of these individuals was, first of all, when my producer might talk to them on the phone or invite them, they just made it clear, like, look, we want to invite all people to the table. It's going to be very respectful. We're not, I mean, I'm sure they said to them on that call, like, we just want to hear your viewpoint. We want to respect you and listen to your viewpoint, no matter what it is. Trust me, you'll be in good hands, that kind of thing, which might be a reason not to trust somebody as soon as they say, trust me. But then when we were all in the room and everybody was there and we'd met everybody, and was he's kind of said, "Hey, everybody sit over here and here's the cameras." I will talk to them because I'm not on camera at all during this. And I'll just say, "Listen, thank you, everybody. I want you to know we're not here for the soundbite. We're not here to make an argument. We're not here to grandstand our arguments. We're here to understand each other's points of view, if that's possible. And if it's not, okay. But we're glad you're here. Let's just try. And the only thing I ask is that everybody respect everybody else during this session."
I assume that's got to be a big part of it. Is what do you encourage, or to a certain extent, I don't know if this happens, but even permit of like, oh, whoa, we're going to shut this down if someone's disrespectful, or we're just not going to do that.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
and I did say that. I said if things, well, we're just like, don't let this, it never got out of hand. There was a couple times that some of the arguments got a little heated, but it was still like, I understand. We're just never going to see eye to eye on this, and I know where you're coming from, and you know where I'm coming from, and and there's a little bit of that in the film. But I think the main thing also, the last thing I want to say about gaining trust of a subject in an interview or in a group situation is, if you said something in this session that really bothers you, that you really don't want to have in here, just tell me. I'm the director. I'm actually going to be the editor. Just please let me know, and I will respect your wishes.
mm-hmm.
That promise, and it is a promise, it's very sincere, really goes a long way to letting people know that it's okay. They're in good hands, because it means that they can just kind of relax a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't want to say something stupid, or they don't want to say something. I've had people come up to me after an interview and say, that thing I said about my dad, I really don't want that in here because he's going to see this someday. And I'll be like, okay.
Yeah.
Sometimes that makes me upset in the editing room. Like, yeah, but that was the best
That was so
quote.
great.
No, sometimes I will actually return to that subject and say, you know what? I want to tell you why I want to put this quote in the movie, because it's so powerful and it's going to help so many people through the situation that you are working through. And if we can put it in the movie, it's going to help others. And that's often the case. Not, I don't know, that didn't happen in this particular film where these were more groups coming together. But
Mhm.
yeah, anyway, I think that was the process, and
Well,
just yeah.
yeah, I think one of the fears people have is if they give a little, then they're saying it's okay to things that they don't believe in. But one of the things that it brought out in those discussions is there were people who would either they would preface it, or you would just pick up on the fact that they were coming from maybe a certain background. But someone might be like philosophically associated with a group that maybe I don't believe in. However, I also noticed many of those people would throw out some of the talking points that were usually associated with their party or their philosophy and make fun of them and say, or whatever, that they'd say like, yeah, I don't, yeah, people on my side say this. And here's why I think that's not great. And it's like, if we
Yeah.
weren't listening, we wouldn't know that they don't believe that whole cloth necessarily. And that they're, or at least more open to talking about it. That I felt was a very powerful thing to come out. Because if I'm like, oh, you're on that side, you probably are okay with fill in the blank that I hate. And if you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Because,
totally. Well,
yeah,
we have so many preconceived notions of what people are based on their looks, what they're wearing, how their attitude is when they sit down at the table. And you look at them, and one of my favorite things about this project was stereotype smashing, just destroying it. Where I would look at somebody and say, I know this type. Because I'm human too. Like I would like completely look at them and go,
right. You're
"Oh,
like,
I totally
yeah,
know where this woman's going to come from. I know she's a dyed-in-the-wool liberal, this and that, and I'm a liberal too, whatever. I'm a Christian, but I know
sure.
this person really well." And then I go, "Oh, they have an AR."
Right. Yes, you find that
And it's
out.
like,
And
wait
it's
a
like,
minute,
yeah,
that's just totally, and yet they're completely for legislation and everything else, but they just don't believe in banning guns and they don't think there's anything wrong with having guns.
sure.
They want to talk about these other things. And then there'll be somebody on the other side who I might think, wow, this is a strong pro-gun, real, somebody very strongly on that side. The kind of the 100%er, like
Yeah.
there is the type of people who are saying there is no discussion. There is no argument. This is the way it's got to be. And there's no bending the rules. Those kinds of people I would look at, and then you'd be just shocked at how open they were to talking about red flag laws, for
When
example,
you find out
or
that
things
people are
like that.
actually
Or,
people and that they're reasonable or that they want to be reasonable. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, like there's a gun owner who is just very ardent, very, strong gun owner, very strongly in that position, who knew a friend whose child had been killed by an accidental, they were playing cowboys and Indians and the gun went off and killed the 5-year-old. And it just rocked that community. And it just, it's so he has that heart. He has that experience enough to be able to say, look, I'm a gun owner and I'm very pro Second Amendment, believe me, but I understand the devastation of violence. I understand that. I'm not, like people on the left tend to dehumanize those folks. And it's like, no, we all know people who've maybe we don't all, but we all are we're at least one step away, we're like
Yeah.
whatever, we're one, you
Well, and
know,
also, I mean, as a member of the left myself, being over there, I think we tend to even turn on each other because we'll try to outdo each other in some ways. And so, yeah, a
yeah.
lot of times when we get caught into a philosophy first, it is interesting to be able
You
to do
also,
that and to maintain our own integrity at the same time being like, but I can listen to someone else's and believe they might have integrity too.
yeah, and you mentioned this earlier, this idea of, we're in one of the most, a very, you know, troubled, challenged in terms of gun violence neighborhood in Chicago.
Absolutely. Or your
And
neighborhood.
there, we're talking to a group who actually have a gun safety program. So they're very pro-gun in the sense that they absolutely believe people should be able to be armed for a lot of different reasons, political and otherwise. I mean, and it's really fascinating because they're living in neighborhoods where it's a super high rate of gun death. And their whole pitch was, we don't have any problem with the guns. We have a problem with people getting guns who are ignorant about how to use them. So they had this robust safety program of teaching people how to use their guns because people just get a handgun and they think they can protect their home. And a lot of the violence we read about is caused by people not knowing how to handle guns. And it's just, it flips it slightly because you'd think like, oh, they're just going to be totally opposed. Not at all. Same thing in Montana. There was a young man in that group who is gay and just and actually runs a gun safety program for his community, which is just, I don't know. I
Well,
think by
there's
traditional stereotypes, it's like, oh,
sure.
I don't know why, but that's not even proper for me to say that. But there is a stereotype, and I was
Well,
just like,
no, there
oh wow,
definitely is. Sure.
he's running this incredible program and teaching about trauma medicine and teaching about gun safety and not at all anti-gun. But
Wow.
because they feel threatened, there's this reality of like, well, we as a community feel threatened. Therefore, we're going to arm ourselves. Therefore, we need to be smarter and better about gun safety.
Yeah.
It's just an interesting, it goes
Well,
way
and
beyond
people
interesting.
deal, right? Because people deal with fear and hard things differently. I mean, I work with a lot of members, and I support. Obviously, anyone listening to the show, we support and highlight a lot of charities around the trans community, and there are members of the trans community. This is a population that is often more than average targeted for violence. And so there are people
Yeah.
in that community that are like, yeah, protect one's self and do so safely. So there's a lot of that. I wanted to highlight too, one of the things that you guys mentioned is unfortunately a lot of these things don't play they don't get enough attention. Even with the public shootings, it's just gotten to where there's so many they don't hit the headlines anymore. But one of the things you mentioned is also the common gun violence that exhibits itself by suicide and the increased
Yes.
risk of that of death by suicide. And I wonder if you talk a little bit about those choices to highlight that when that can get lost in the sort of the story of gun violence.
Well, we focus a lot on school shootings and mass shootings and in
Right.
this country, and with very good reason, because they're absolutely terrifying and changing the culture of our entire country. That said, it's really hard to believe that the number of people who have been shot in mass shootings in schools and otherwise, it's actually very little. And the number of gun deaths that contribute to the suicide rate is quite a bit higher. It's something like 60, something like 60 or higher percent of all gun deaths are suicide. Um, and that leads one to realize that I think, and this comes up quite a lot in our film, is just the idea of the availability of guns for those who are for legislation and banning certain types of guns and everything else. One of their strongest arguments is the availability. If somebody is hurting, they're really hurting, and they grab a gun and they're feeling suicidal, the sad thing about a gun is that it ends in death almost every time. Something like 85% of all suicide attempts, if they're by gun,
Yeah.
end in death. And that, in other words, it's highly effective. And
You
it's
put that
just,
together with the availability of intoxicants and the fascination we have with alcohol too in our society. You put those together, that's very dangerous.
yeah, it is. Just the availability of, just Catch Secor says it so beautifully in the film when he tells a very personal story, which I won't divulge right now, but it's very emotional in the film. And at the end, he just says, people are hurting
Mhm.
out there. And there's a gun, and that gun is within reach. And that's the reason why this statistic, and that's the reason for this, and that's the reason kids, it's the number one, guns are the number one killer of children in our country. It used to be, car accidents or accidental death. It's not. It's the number one cause of death is firearms. And,
Mhm.
you know, when I say that, I'm not disrespecting the right to own guns. I really am not. But it's a fact. And I think, that's what Catch's whole point is. If we can come together at the table, we can all agree that that's not acceptable.
Mhm.
It's just not okay. We got to do something together. And it's an interesting film in some ways because it's not an advocacy film. An advocacy documentary typically takes a strong point of view and sells the argument, and it's either an amazing argument, you go, oh my God, I totally believe this now, and I'm done. And where's the call to action at the end of the film? Where's the website? What do I do? I love those films when they're good. I've seen some bad ones too, but when they're good, like I'm blown away and I'm moved and I'm wow. I don't make those kind of films for a lot of different reasons, but this film is also not one of those. We don't have a call to action at the end. The call to action is simply talk to that person that you think you disagree with. Have a conversation with the person, your neighbor or your relative, or just talk more about this. Because the more we talk about our experiences and what we're feeling and share our feelings, and there's the therapy part of it again, the better off we're going to be. The more we're going to understand this problem, and then we can make legislation or whatever we want to do, community action, some kind of a community action that will make more sense. Part of the problem with legislation, just on that point, and is simply that the legislators don't understand guns. And it's too bad that the people who want to do something, in politics aren't making sound legislation that gun owners respond to. They're just like, it's just, there's no conversation. So that just creates this argument of like, you put out that ridiculous law, that's not going to work. So why should we respect you? And vice versa. Then they look at them and say, "Wait, you're just Second Amendment? That's it? You don't care about the killings in our school?" It's just a stalemate. It's just terrifying.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
What One of the things I'm fascinated by is the way that people advocate. And I know in advocacy for all kinds of causes, there's always an ongoing balance between what do we put out there that shows the problem, what do we put out there that shows the inherent solutions and things, and how do we blend that? One of the things about music as a tool is that music is oftentimes, it helps us conceptualize our hurt and our sadness, but it also is a tool of exuberance and joy, right?
Hmm.
And as I was watching this film, I'm like, there's a joyful nature to the creation and the performance of music, and people getting into that and investing into that, and the role that that plays in connection also with the sorrow and the fear and the pain. And it was very fascinating to me to see the sort of, like I said, the exuberance of performance and of the music itself. It wasn't a dreary dirge that is being put out there. It was something that was engaging and hopeful. And I was just curious if that came up and how you were feeling about the role that joy plays in the work that's being done here.
I think it's essential. The film would be just, it would be so difficult. It was just conversations only. Like you hear a really intense conversation, and then you get this musical break. And music is so powerful. Music, as everybody has said since the beginning of time, music brings people together. It really does. And the other thing about music is the demographic or your political beliefs does not matter. I mean, I suppose you could argue like it does in certain cases, but like my point is like a great song that everybody can stomp their feet to or sing along to or just love because it's a good song. You don't care who's in that bar with you singing along. You don't care who's at the front row of the it's just it really, it's almost like the Trojan horse of this film. It's like music is the way in. And I told you earlier, I've never made an overtly political film. I do a lot of culture films. I've done portrayals of musicians and artists, and I'm very proud of my work. But I've always been jealous of those people who make really good political films. But when I heard, when David Green called me and said, "Hey, I'm working with my friend Ketch, and we're trying to figure out a way to bring people together to the table and have this conversation," and he invited me to like participate in coming up with something. And the three of us got on a call one day, this is a few years ago, right after the Covenant shootings and shooting. And I just was like, wow, this is a chance. Why don't we do a film? Because I love filming groups talking. I've done a lot of that. I've filmed a lot of intense group kind of therapy type things actually. But at the same time, it's a music film. And my theory was, I want to do this. I get to do a very political film. It's going to be very meaningful to me because I care deeply about this issue, but it's a music film. And so to me, in my mind, it's a music film first. And we come in that way. And it's music that brings people together. And even at the table, because there's definitely Old Crow Medicine Show fans who are in our roundtables, who are there. And
the band
like,
members
oh, wow.
were present too in those discussions.
Yeah, for some of those, we had other band members there too. So yeah, it's like we're in this town, the band's about to play there that night, or maybe they played the night before or whatever. And we're going to say, hey, let's talk about this. We're going to talk about guns. Even though this band has nothing to do with guns, we're going to talk about it. Mm-hmm. And that was Ketch's mission. And he's really good at doing that. And so is David. David is a consummate mediator. He's just amazing. It's funny. David Green, who's a former NPR host, so he hosts the show called Left, Right, and Center. He's the host. So he's always playing the center, which is just perfect for this movie because when he's in these discussions, he's very good at pulling different points of view out. And then Ketch is equally committed to that idea of, I want to hear everybody. I want to hear from everybody. I don't care who it is. And so that energy, plus my energy as a filmmaker of the reason I've never been able to make a polemic advocacy film is because I just really believe people. I really listen to them. And I always see the other point of view way too quickly. I'm always like, oh, that makes sense. I never thought about that,
Yeah.
which makes me a little bit of a softy because I'm like, I can't just go like, all right, it's this way. This is the truth. You're a liar. I'm just like, I really want to understand where you're coming from. And so the three of us together was kind of a perfect team.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, and just the tying together, as I mentioned, there's the musical element of externalizing the pain that's there and the fear, and then also having hope and joy tied with it too. One of the
Hmm.
things that I felt was very powerful, it was in one of the groups anyway. You had everybody raise their hand if they had had their lives affected by gun violence, or had someone that they love affected by it, and it was everyone. Um, and
Pretty
I think
much, yeah.
starting with that, at least, yeah, and that with the one shot, it seemed like it was, um, and to have that to me is a start. That's a very common ground to start with, is we're all
Yeah.
hurting. We're all hurting from the same thing, and that creates, I think, I would think an empathy and a respect immediately of saying like, we're all in this group. We're starting out in the group of hurt and fear and loss. Yeah.
Yeah. It's really true. And it's just so much in common. And as I've traveled, the country and we've played this film in different theaters and stuff, you meet people who come and talk to you in the lobby or something. It'll be like, yeah, yeah, I lost my brother last year. Or you go, oh, wow, I'm so sorry. And like everybody seems to have a story or know somebody, or it's just, yeah, gun violence is pretty rampant,
Yeah.
regardless of what side you're on. It's crazy.
Well, well, it's a powerful message to be able to carry, and one of the things I really like about the message is that it's not just your message. It's you're really trying to highlight the message of people's experiences, the individual messages, I guess we could say,
Hmm.
of the people who you put in there, and obviously treating all of them with a lot of care and respect. And I think that's one of the things that makes this an interesting film, but also useful, I guess, in moving the needle forward in those kinds of discussions, those kinds of things. And I think
Well,
that's power that you have there.
we want the film to be inspirational, and to be really frank with you, it's very hard to get people to go to a theater to see a film about school shootings. Like, are you kidding? I'm going to do that on a beautiful summer night? Like, no.
Well,
I
especially when we're
understand that.
trying often to escape from that particular
That's
pain.
right.
Yeah.
Right. That's why we want to go see like big tentpole movies or, fun stuff.
Usually that highlight a
You know.
lot of use of guns.
Yeah,
I
exactly,
would go watch
right?
John Wick instead of.
Well, I'm thinking
Yeah.
more like, during World War II when the fun musicals got really popular. You know
Right.
what I mean?
Exactly.
Like
Yeah.
there's sort of that like escapism. Um, yeah, it's just, but what I wanted to say is that, but the film actually isn't, it's not depressing, and there's no
Yeah.
gore or violence. We don't, I mean, we depict news events, and that's always incredibly hard to watch, but we don't show, you don't see, there's no blood in the film at all. It's a fairly safe film in that way, and it ends with people really coming together, and like you walk out of the theater kind of going, wow, I
Mhm.
didn't think that could happen, at
Yeah.
all. And it's
Well, it wasn't just.
that's sort of that's how we wanted the film to end, and that's how you feel at the end.
It's so risky with this kind of story to just make it, or to feel like tragedy porn of some kind, of like we're
Yeah.
trading the energy off of that instead of what you're talking about, which is actually finding other human beings. That's one of the great strengths of the human race, the human species, I should say, is community. That's where we solve
Hmm.
problems. I mean, that's what's allowed us to build communities and to build society, is that somebody comes along and says, oh, you're good at growing food. I'm good at hunting. I'll go hunt. You grow plants, or whatever. And
Right.
oh, you make tools. You make tools, and I'll give you some of the food I made and stuff. And I think, and I personally, I think that that's much more human instinct than to say you're good at making stuff. I'll hit you over the head and take the stuff you made. I think
Hmm.
our for the majority of people, the tendency is to say let's build community to fix things and to heal. And so it brings that out.
Yeah, building community is powerful.
Yeah.
There's one other aspect of the film that, for talking with you on this show in particular, that I thought I would just mention. There's a woman in the film who says, she just is talking about suicide, and she says, and gun violence, and she says, Everybody is focused on mental illness, and that's a very common and understandable and sometimes true fact that like mental illness can cause gun violence for sure. But she says, but if we eliminated all, it's like if mental illness were eliminated, gun violence would just drop by only 4%.
Hmm.
And so there's sort of this misnomer on both sides of the argument, on all sides really, that mental illness is a major contributing factor. And I don't mean to lighten up on the fact that it is, but that 4% thing really sticks with me. And after she said that, I was like, that just can't be true. And so I looked it up, and it really, really does seem true. And it's just very interesting that, there's another statistic that most, something like 50% of all Americans deal with some form of mental illness.
Sure.
And the vast majority of those people are victims of gun violence, not necessarily perpetrators. And I just think that stereotype or that misnomer is very interesting to me because it was so shocking to me. And I don't repeat that. We don't talk statistics in the film much at all. It's not one of those movies. Like we don't put up numbers on the screen ever. But in making the film, that was something that really
Yeah.
got to me.
Well, and speaking as someone who works in mental health, I find that it bothers me when it's used as a talking point just as much as anything else can, because it isn't helpful to people's mental health to suggest that if you have mental illness, you're going to hurt people. And it certainly isn't helpful to only bring up mental health when somebody gets hurt or killed, right? And to say,
Yeah.
and so those things, yeah, you're right, exactly. I'm obviously an advocate of mental health treatment and things, but I think that, yeah, just so I find it kind of offensive when it's used as a talking point especially when people are using it to dismiss something else. So,
Yeah.
yeah, those are I don't care for that either. So it is good. Yeah, that's a good part of the message to bring out. Well, once again, I think everybody should go and should check this out. Louder Than Guns is the film, and I want to tell people where they might be able to see it if we're into some distribution news or anything that we can tell them. Before we do that, though, I always like to ask people come on the show if they would share something that they believe in to help people find ways of giving back to the community. Could be a charity or a nonprofit, and could be related to anything at all. And I'm just curious if you have anything that you would like to share with people.
Yeah, well, I I've given and supported a lot of charities over my life, and I really believe in things like Amnesty International and Doctors Without Borders and things like that. Those are two of my absolute go-to doing the most, I think, in the world that is trying to be apolitical. And that's the key is, which is hard because as soon as you take action, there's some politics saying you shouldn't do that or that's stupid or a waste of money. But there's a small group called Give a Beat. It's Give a Beat, GIVEABEAT.com. And what they do is they go into prisons, and and they work with prisoners and teach them the power of music and how to become a DJ. And so it's a DJ. Wow. It's DJs. And it was very close to me because I made a film called Scratch, which was about hip hop DJs early on in my career. It was my second feature film. And I really got to know a lot of DJs and the DJ community. And my film, fortunately, kind of hit at a really good time, and it became very popular in the DJ community. And so I got involved just slightly with this group, Give a Beat. I thought, what a cool program. Yeah. They're just doing one thing. And the reason I'm mentioning is I like organizations, unlike the first two I mentioned, which are huge and, around the world. Mm-hmm. But I like small, effective, and simple programs that I can contribute to. I don't work with them directly, but I just, give money when I can. And I'm not a millionaire, so not as much as I'd like. But that just is effective. That goes into prisons and gets these guys learning a skill, getting into music, having fun with music, and being a DJ is kind of the ultimate thing because you can play it for others, and it's not like learning, whatever. Learning instruments is awesome too. But anyway, I just like them. I think they're really cool.
Yeah, I love highlighting. I always try to pick charities, particularly local charities, so people can see
Yeah.
how some of those things are being done on a micro level or whatever level. And sometimes there's a lot getting done when people are doing that, especially when they have one thing they focus on. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. It's a
Now I got to
single
watch your
purpose.
film too. Now I got to go back and watch Scratch to know about that. So tell now, do you have any information? Where can people learn or follow things about the film or your work? And do we know where this is going to be seen, where people can watch it?
Yes, we are. It's a slow release, but that's how we like it because we like to be able to have the conversation wherever the film plays. So we're doing a limited theatrical release right now. We've played in New York City and Nashville and Houston. We're going to be in Beacon, New York next week on Monday, I believe, and we're going to be in Los Angeles and Glendale and Santa Monica on the 28th and 29th of July, respectively. And that you can find all the screening information at our website, which is literally louderthanguns.com. Very simple, and you can find screenings, upcoming screenings. I also want to say that we are, if you're not anywhere near some of those cities, 'cause we're also playing in other cities moving forward, like Louisville. We're going to be in Alexandria near DC in August. Just, kind of ongoing, and you can check our website for those. But we're also on this program on PBS called Real South, which is a consortium of Southern PBS affiliates who have this film series. But basically, what it means is you can watch our film, a shortened version, like a television version. It's a 55-minute version of Louder Than Guns. The one you see in the theaters is a full 89 minutes. That's the full feature. But you can see that if you get the PBS app, you can instantly see it, which is a free app. You can just download it and watch Louder Than Guns. And you can also see that on YouTube. They just last Monday, Real South released Louder Than Guns on YouTube. So if you look up Louder Than Guns on YouTube, and especially if you add Real South, which is REEL South, you can definitely watch the short version there as well, which,
Wow.
if you can't go to the theater or, not near a theater who's playing it, it's a great way to check it out and spread the word.
Well, Doug, thank you so much. I really appreciate you being here, and thanks for sharing this with us, making it in the first place so we can watch it and talk about it.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed this conversation because of the angle that you're approaching films and culture with, and I think it's really meaningful, and it brings out a part of the film that I hadn't really talked about before.